Hey everyone that's here on International Podcast Day. I want to welcome you to I want to welcome our special guest. We've got Mr. Adam Curry with us. Adam, how are you?
Hey guys, happy International Podcast Day to y'all.
And for those of you that don't know, Adam is the Podfather of Podcasting. And of course, I always like to give credit to Dave Weiner as well. I kind of call him the co-father of podcasting. And of course, I've got Mike Dell with part of my team here at Blubrry with us as well. But
hi guys. Happy Podcast Day.
So a lot to cover here in the next 50 minutes or so. And Adam, we were talking just before we got started. I just want to kind of talk a little bit about the history of podcasting. And Mike, what year did you come into the space, Mike? You were in 2005, right?
Yeah, early 2005.
So you jumped in really still pretty early. But Adam, when you were sitting around, it really started before 2004, but this idea of being able to have this medium that would be able to be delivered without any gatekeepers. Where did this all come from?
I've always wanted to be a broadcaster. I've always wanted to be a radio guy. When I was 15, I built my first radio transmitter, my first FM radio transmitter. And my mom kindly drove me around the block, trying to see how far the signal would reach. That has always been kind of my mission, mainly because I wanted to be on radio. Getting onto the radio is not necessarily an easy thing to do, particularly if there's limited, there's limited stations, etc. So I've been doing pirate radio. I've actually worked at, professional radio stations, right down to syndicated radio. Just always loved radio. I mean, look at me. I've got the perfect face for radio. So, that was my mission online. And at the time when I was thinking about this, I was still working, mainly television stuff, but we had real audio and just, we really didn't have the bandwidth. And I'd figured out, I knew there would be a trick. I knew there was a kind of a time-shifting magic trick that could be done where you would just be told that there was something new, a new show, when it was already downloaded onto your computer or onto your. Well, what did we have then? I think we had a couple of MP3 players, but it was very sparse at the beginning. In 2000, actually, I had this idea, was walking around with, and I kind of wound up with my chocolate and Dave Weiner's peanut butter. And we figured out how to build this, which was really quite simple, the enclosure element in an RSS feed. And he already had the aggregator side, which is in essence quite simplistic, although these days there's a lot more to it. When I saw the iPod, it was like just the light bulb went off. The same light bulb when I built my first FM transmitter when I was 15. It's like, holy crap, this is a radio receiver. It's not just a music jukebox. And so the concept of putting all that together, that kind of became podcasting, really with the help of a lot of very dedicated, independent developers who were working on showing how a radio receiver worked. And that's what I realize now with the state of podcasting as it is today, is that I never focused on the radio, on the receiver side. I mean, I've never had to do that when I was doing commercial radio or public radio or pirate radio. It didn't have, people had radio. Shit would just work. And there was enough of them everywhere. So that luxury is fading or is changing. And that's why I'm trying to do some other things, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But podcasting really predates the social network. Twitter was originally a podcast company, and they pivoted very successfully into a phenomenon. But podcasting has been around for a long, long, long time. We're talking. What are we talking now? 15 years, 16 years?
I think 16. 16 and change, because I started my show in October of 2004, and you guys are already kicking it on the daily source code, and that's how I heard about podcasting, of course. But so you guys have been going a while before that. So yeah, we're 16 years at least, 16 plus.
It's that's a long time. So really, what happened is a big radio manufacturer came along, and that was Steve Jobs, who already had kind of the radio. He just didn't know that it was a radio yet until the podcasting community, by using it, told him this is a radio. So he saw that, he understood it. He asked me to bless it. It was very, very thrilling, very complimentary. But I didn't consider that, we would need other radio manufacturers because if someone has a lock on that, it's like your satellite radio in your car really only does one channel.
Right.
Not one channel, but one provider. So they kind of have you in a box. They can do whatever you want with fees or advertising or combination. And there's just no room for anyone to do that kind of a service without a lot of money, and thus resorting to business models that aren't necessarily compatible with what everyone wants to say or hear.
One thing that you said earlier is something that I like to relate back to, and it kind of has come full circle, is you talk about pirate radio. What did you do pirate radio for? To get around the man. You wanted that antenna on the roof, and you wanted to be able to put that middle finger up and say, hey, I'm broadcasting. You can't stop me. Now you can hunt me down and find me if you can find me. But what we did, or what you did, and kicked off what I call as evolution is, and most people don't realize how dramatically different it is today than what it was in 2004, is, this was my radio receiver.
Oh, there you go.
A little iRiver. And I think
nice. Yeah, I got one around here.
Absolutely. And I keep it around as a reminder, is that was my, if I'm going to listen to music or podcast, that was it. And I didn't have enough money for an iPod at that time. And, later on I did, obviously, but the ability to be able to walk out, and I think the thing that people need to realize is the ability in 2004, when this thing kicked off, the ability to walk out of your house with a pocket full of content that you chose to listen to, not what was being fed to you by FM 100 or AM 690 or whatever channel it was truly evolutionary, because in order to get on those, you had to be an intern, you had to kiss somebody's butt. You had to
get rid of the corporate overlords,
You had a program director and some GM, and maybe you'd get a little jock time, and at 2:00 in the morning to, Mike, you kind of did a little bit of that, where 2:00 in the morning radio stuff, right?
Oh yeah, and some weekend stuff on a community radio station that advertises its power as powerful as a moderately sized blow dryer.
So the average Joe, if you wanted to even get on any type of platforms that were available, then you had to do a deal with Microsoft, or you had to sign some deal with some corporate mogul. And I remember asking stupidly, hey, how much is it going to be to get podcasts onto channel 862 of this cable network? And the guy says, 10 years, $10 million, and good luck. I'm thinking, I can't get podcasts on channel 862 on a cable TV. And then I really got thinking later, said, that was dumb. Why do I want to? That was dumb.
This kind of plays into where we're at right now.
Right.
This is really important. And I know you'll jump in because you're an active participant in this, and I really appreciate it. So seeing that and being a podcaster myself, I care. I care that I can speak my mind freely, within the rules of the Constitution, which I believe in the First Amendment, and the business model of today's big technology companies is advertising. Now, when you have a huge infrastructure like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, these are very, very costly enterprises. So to compete with that is inherently difficult, independently, unless you start up another advertising-based service. And there's a lot that goes on with that, with algorithms and ad buying networks. And it's quite a big venture. It costs billions of dollars. So when big companies like Spotify and Amazon and Google and Apple have an app which sits right next to an independent app, except their app has an advertising business model, and to be on their app, you have to sign their terms of service, which in some cases is fully paid for $0, global license to create derivative work, whatever. It doesn't matter. They're basically saying, you're on here, we can do what we want to do. We may or may not cut you in. They probably will. It only makes sense, obviously. But we can also take you off. And inherent to the advertising business model is offensive speech to advertisers, not the people, not the First Amendment, just to advertisers. They don't want controversy. They don't want it. And sometimes it is just, people and ideologies, etc. But central to it is that power has shown us demonetization, deplatforming from every single big technology network. Now, again, those are multi-billion-dollar companies. Podcasts have been around for 15 years, and it's very manageable because it's decentralized kind of by nature. No one needs to own it as long as we have independent manufacturers of radios, the apps. Now, creating an app there's no incentive. And you're not going to make any money from the advertisements that play on the radio. So why are you doing it? You can't. I mean, it's hard to sell an app. It's got to be so great or so innovative, which I believe there's still room for, but we haven't really seen it yet. That there will be a commercial viable business model for it. Since advertising, as I just said, you need huge infrastructure to do that properly, and then your network, and then you have agreements, and then we have yet another possible silo. So instead of running huge infrastructure, I want independent developers to be able to develop the podcast app, the radio of their dreams, and B, I want them to be cut into some kind of value flow of the whole ecosystem between the listener, the app that shows them, displays them, promotes them. I mean, why wouldn't we have an app that completely promotes one type of podcast? There's all different variations once we get outside of the box. I think that's really necessary in order to really preserve podcasting as a platform for free speech. I'm not saying freedom of speech, free speech. Just I should be able to say what I want, and I shouldn't have to worry that an advertiser business model will remove me from spreading that overnight, where people get accustomed to hearing me. I mean, we did not sign the terms of service with Spotify, so they took us off, which is right. We're not an Amazon either. So that is that's good because we have our audience. They know how to find us, and we have enough independent apps out there. But we need to stimulate some growth.
Let me give the folks a little context here, because some of you may be going, "Well, I get my podcast." People say, I'm getting my podcast on Apple Podcasts, or I'm getting my podcast on Overcast or Podcast or on these 20 apps. So what's the problem? Well, what it is, and most of you don't fully realize this, is that we all submit to Apple Podcasts because that's the number one distribution point. The Apple Podcast app is still number one in consumption. Apple has got an API that basically allows app developers to go in and pull and fulfill and to populate their apps. And
some information,
right?
And it's by their system.
It's by their system and by their authority and invite. Now, Apple may never shut down their API, but there could come a day where they decide, no, this maybe isn't financial viable, or we have to start taking shows off because some social justice media wars is going after a podcast, or whatever may be the reason.
Well, it's not hypothetical, though, Todd.
Well,
that did happen. It did happen. InfoWars and Alex Jones.
That's right.
You may not like his speech, but even Apple, who had fear for maybe their devices, took the L on that. So
that's right.
And I want to make sure it's clear. I love Apple for what they've been doing for podcasting. They're great stewards. They've been very kind, very open, and they've contributed. They've really, it helps them that with their devices. But they have done quite a bit, and I appreciate that. But I also think that it's not a problem for us to have, a system next to theirs, which is community run, and we fix a lot of the problems that we have as a community with the index. And it turns out there's a lot of stuff that people want differently, from categories to different ways of searching. I mean, it's deep. It goes beyond me. You know a lot more about it than I do. That's really fascinating.
Right. It's also not a good thing to just have one entity in charge of that catalog.
Exactly.
And with what you're doing and what we've done at Blubrry as well, we have a directory that's independent of Apple.
Precisely.
So Adam started what's called the...
Add that I hope that what I'm seeing now with people saying, how do we, because we make our entire index available, how do we distribute this so as a community and an ecosystem, we're synced up, the podcastindex.org is synced with Blubrry, is synced to whatever degree with Apple. Let's make sure that we have stuff needs to go out, go in, and stuff needs to come out. There's a lot of crap and doubles of feeds and piracy, all things that I think you're seeing it. We're starting to solve some of these feeds that are fake, that re-upload shows. People come up with algorithms to detect them. This is stuff that Apple has no time to do. And I'm really proud of the community around podcastindex.org that is solving these problems. And you're absolutely right. Mike, it needs to be distributed. We can't be the only guys. I mean, we're running on donations. And, we can fund it ourselves for a while, but at a certain point, we're running 14, 15 servers now already just to keep up with it.
So for those, Adam started what's called basically he's termed the Podcast 2.0. I don't want to call it the initiative, but it's all revolving around podcastindex.org. There's a lot of geeks over there right now, a lot of developers, a lot of people coming and giving ideas, writing code, contributing to the community project. And essentially, for those of you that are maybe a little bit lost because maybe you don't understand the full mechanics of what happens behind the, when you hit publish with your podcast with your hosting provider, is really what was being what is being done here is where, and I'm maybe Adam, you're gonna laugh at me, but I'm calling it an insurance policy. Podcast.index.org is an insurance policy to make sure that podcasting remains on the air, remains free, as you said, cannot be controlled by gatekeepers. And in effect, you mentioned Apple having removed Alex Jones and InfoWars. What a lot of people don't know is that because Alex, and you may not agree with this content, that's not a discussion for this session.
That's never what free speech is about.
Right.
Is the content is really not the issue.
So what a lot of people don't know is he controlled his RSS feed. So essentially, even though he was removed from the master directory and it was deplatformed off of other sources, his audience, whether you like them or not, can still get that content. So the analogy I'm starting to like to share with you guys is that I was in an event at DragonCon a year ago where there was a diverse community of creators was discussing about how they had been, their voice wasn't allowed to be heard. They were doing protests or whatever they were doing. The news organization stuff were talking to maybe a bystander on the street instead of someone that was actually organizing a protest. So they got so pissed off about not being able to get their message out. They started a podcast so that their community people could listen to it and be heard. So it's not just the thing that podcasting, what Adam and Dave and this whole community of people created is something where we don't want some corporate suit to say, for whatever commercial reason, I don't like you, and we're making a committee decision to pull your show and cut you off.
You're hitting the nail on the head. This is very important distinction. I'm not concerned with show. I'm concerned with podcast as a platform. It is incredibly valid and useful to have a mechanism for distributing an archive of speech for whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a show that starts and ends. It can just be recordings of something that is important to you. And it should be possible for anybody who can record whatever they wanted to put it up on a feed, and for many receivers, many radio receivers, to immediately be able to receive that. That's your podcast app. With the current system, you're already submitting to Apple. There's multi-submit like Blubrry has, and you submit to multiple places. If you have a new feed, there's a review process. I don't think that's necessary. It's not necessary for free speech. It's necessary for advertising business models. And oh, by the way, you do sign a term of service on the way in, and you will be held to that, and that will be your downfall when you go outside the terms of what is acceptable as free speech within that commercial entity, which I have no problem with. I mean, power to it. I want lots of people to make money, and I want everybody to have tons of fun and cash with all the many advertising-based solutions that are coming up. You're right. The scope of part one of my mission is preserve podcasting as a platform for free speech. That's an insurance policy. I think the term or the word preserve already says that. We are still going to fail if we do not have a way to incentivize app development. Part one is making sure they don't have to deal with the heavy lifting, making sure they don't have to become gatekeepers, making sure they can just focus on experience. part two is how do we have the value chain, the flow through the radio receiver without advertising is easy, but people with a lot of money can do that better than we. We should be able to preserve that free speech with one of the many models that are out. Patreon, donations, value for value. I estimate, let's just go, and you tell me if these IAB numbers are off. There's 100 million people in America who listen to 1 hour of podcast a day. Does that sound right?
I think that's close. We'd have to look at the Edison numbers and all that, but I'd say that's about right.
And I'm just going to say that's 7 days a week. So I'll take the value. I'm just putting a value on something. My time is worth more than $1, but some people feel $1 is fine. So if 100 million people do that, then we have 1 million people a day who I think you could ask to donate.
1% of that 100 million.
I think it's higher on our show, but I think that's possible. That's $1 million an hour right there. So that has to be distributed somehow. And payment systems are equally a problem as different podcast apps owned by big commercial companies. There are many topics of free speech that payment systems no longer allow. And you see, some people can't even get a bank. So you can only imagine, I'm not the only one who has seen it. Dave Jones and I have been taking incoming pitches from a lot of people, from Square to Plaid to all these different ideas. And I'm honestly thinking that there is, from what I've seen and what people have taught me and from what I've learned, there's definitely a way to have some kind of digital currency flowing through this network that would cut everybody in, and that would, I don't know if it's going to be cheaper. I know it's going to be more anonymous or secure. I think we can actually distribute it. It's a huge on-ramp, but when you're only talking a database, raw database, a little under 2 million feeds, let's say just extrapolate that to 1.4 million podcasts, maybe 1.5, who knows? That's very doable at a community distributed level. And once we've completed this phase one, and I think we're probably about halfway through, then we're going to start looking at that. Otherwise, we'll still fail. So this is, in my mind, this is a fantastic opportunity, a moment in time when every smart person on the internet can start thinking, okay, how do we do this? How do we culturally move people? They already do stuff like Patreon. They already do stuff like PayPal. The onboarding seems to be the hardest thing. Is it, how do we do it? And we've been listening to a lot of people. And once we have this part shored up, we're going to come to the community with a proposal that we think will be the way to do that. And everybody benefits, not just the podcaster, but it can tie the whole system in. It can be the hosting, it can be the app, which I'm mostly concerned about is that the app developers, they have to have a way to make money. Otherwise, you will have no radios in the future that are independently owned. And it's a really simple thing to build. It's not that hard.
Mike, you and I deal with this every day with having podcasters get on different platforms. Has Spotify sent you a check, Mike, for your show being on Spotify?
Well, my shows aren't on Spotify, but if they were, they probably would not have my show's on Spotify, but I haven't gotten a check from Spotify. So, but if you play a radio, not a radio, if you play a music song from Taylor Swift on Spotify, she might get a penny. They've already screwed those artists already in the royalty system they've set up for music artists, but at least she might get a penny from you playing the Taylor Swift song. But so what Spotify and other groups are doing is they're getting all this free, great content that's drawing thousands and millions of people on their platforms to listen to it that they're monetizing against, and yet the content creator is getting zero. The app developers, like Adam has referred to, unless they're running some advertising in their app, they're getting zero. They're not making any money. I know how much it costs to build an app. It's about $200,000 to build an app these days. It's not cheap to build an app. So at least a good one.
Yeah, at least a good one. So I think that there's lots of opportunities here, and I'm worried about the independent podcast creators long term, Adam. I want to make sure the indie's number one. Not everyone's worried about making money. Some people are doing podcasts for fun.
Well, but this helps them by default. I mean,
Right.
So I think by its nature, podcasters are kind of independent because
Sure.
what I love about podcasts, it is pretty much the definition of free speech. I mean, it is literally people speaking with each other that you are listening to, and you are listening to ideas. Of course, some dress it up, some have sound effects, so, whatever it is, whether it's a book. I mean, all this stuff is valid in podcasting as an ecosystem and a platform. So this protects everybody. That's why the index, that just runs pure on donations. And it turns out when you ask people, we do a podcast called Podcasting 2.0. It's not available in the Apple index. So it probably is on, but you can find an RSS link at podcastindex.org. And you should, if you have a real podcast app, you should be able to add it manually. When you ask people and say, hey, what is it worth to you to have this guaranteed, as you would call it, insurance policy? Turns out people start putting in monthly orders for $20 or $50. We've had some people send us $500. Keep it running, whatever I can do to help. So I'm not a fan of pricing anything. I hate the whole, I'm not against licensing, but when it gets down to and it's less than a penny per stream, way less than a penny per stream for Taylor Swift. But even I never liked iTunes with the unbundling of the album, turning it into 99-cent track, which is like the most insulting thing in the world. And listen to the Beatles. That's only worth 99 cents. To me, if you said it's $10, I would have paid it too. But now that you nickel and dime me, I'm getting my head in that space, and that hurts everybody. So value is very different from person to person. My example of $1 an hour per day with a million people, that's only if they value what they're doing for a full hour. Why not value it at your minimum wage? Now all of a sudden we have something, and we just have to figure out a way to distribute that. I've been looking at cryptocurrencies, very interesting. I've never really delved into it as much as recently because I've had people just incoming with all kinds of ideas. It's a different way of thinking about money, and it's very exciting. Everything is upside down. Everything is backwards. It makes no sense. But if we can, again, kind of build that like what I did with podcasts, build a little layer on top, don't rush out and get a crypto wallet and think you're going to understand what the heck is going on with invoices and all this stuff. No. We will need to build something over that to make it easy for people to see, I got a podcast wallet and I want to put some money in the podcaster's wallet. And I'm real happy if I keep the index running and the app developers going, and maybe I need to send some to the hosting guy who's providing the bandwidth. And these are, by the way, religious conversations. So we're staying away from all that for now. We are building the index, but I want you to know that we have a real long-term vision once we get phase 1 done.
And some of you, I just want to bring it back too. And so I run a podcast hosting company. I have a commercial interest. I have to make money for my company. That is, I have to pay salaries. I have to pay benefits, all the stuff that a normal company does. And because I have a direct view. So here's the difference. I have a commercial interest in making sure our directory stays up. Sure, I've got an API that people can access that directory, but I'm a commercial interest and I have commercial goals. Okay. What Adam has set up with Podcast 2.0 and the Podcast Index is, while they do have a company around it, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that, Adam, is I have to make money. I have to keep the employees fed because I'm a business. But you, on the other hand, what you've set up here with the podcastindex.org is truly, and I'll let you explain it. I think what you're really doing here is yeoman's work to make sure that the podcasting space can never be taken away from.
Well, thank you, and that is the intent. We do want to be some kind of plumbing, and I'm interested in that because if you have good plumbing, everybody's going to benefit, and it should be pretty much a commodity. We realize that there's, especially when you get into value transfer, you're just going to have to deal with a lot of legality, etc. And we're prepared to do that if we can fund it. So we have no funding. We started with our own money. We now have maybe $4,000, which is nice. We'll keep the servers running. So that's really helpful. But we only want to benefit really, mainly, I do 6 hours a week, just no agenda. I do another, 3 hours a week or every 10 days with Mo Facts. My stepdaughter has a podcast. I want people to be able to continue to do that. It's how I make my living. So I need to make it is totally an insurance plan for myself. It's no doubt about it. But if we can become some kind of plumbing, which would only work distributed, that's the only way it works these days. I'm a decentralized guy. We want to be there. We want to help. Everything else, I'm confident that we can keep the podcast index up and running based upon just the community supporting it with time, talent, and treasure. Really, that's the whole value model. If you can deliver one of those, you're really helping. And maybe together we'll figure out how we all can benefit from our own little system of value transfer.
I'm going to let Mike ask some questions here in a second, but I will have to pitch your show. And for those of you that have never listened to Adam's primary show, the No Agenda Show, you need to listen to it, because if you want to figure out a model that is value for value and teach your audience how to support the work you put into your show and not have an advertiser, this is the show to listen to. And I'm saying this because I've listened to Adam's show and how they produce it, and they talk about, I've never seen a more loyal and engaged audience. So if nothing else, go over there and listen to the show and learn by listening to 20 shows how Adams and his partner John has built a show that's pretty incredible. Just look at the model that they built with that. That's an aside from what we're talking about here. But Mike, I'm sure you've got a couple of questions on what's going on with Podcast Index 2.0 or Podcast Index.
Yeah, been playing around with that app that they came out with, the web app, and
Podfriend.
Yeah, Podfriends. There we go.
Oh, that's your guys's?
Yeah.
We're just talking. I was just talking about this 20 minutes ago. I didn't know that you guys did that.
Yeah, that's Martin from Denmark.
Oh man, I've got.
Yeah, you've seen with the green avatar on podcastindex.social. You might have seen him.
So let me.
I'm sorry, Mike. You had a question about it.
No. I was just saying, things like that are just, the beauty of this index that you're having, that you've got. I know James Cridland over at Pod News has
they
pulled
use
it
it for
into
their search and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And of course, I've been bugging our developers to look into it as well.
We appreciate that. Yes, we've noticed you do that. So just the thing about Podfriend, this is how a community works. Is really beautiful. So Martin's in Denmark. I don't think I've ever met him before. We said on our podcast, we said we really need a kind of a reference app. But just as we've seen the same big silos, iOS and Android, take deplatform apps because they connect to services where dangerous speech could be found. And I'm talking specifically about Mastodon apps. And I believe it's also on iOS been removed. I could be mistaken. There's every reason to believe that an app will no longer be allowed to be in the App Store. So what all platforms luckily allow is for a progressive web app, PWA, which if you've ever seen a web page, you have an option. You can either save it to your, I think it's home screen on Android, and save it to desktop, I think, whatever, on iOS. And it opens, it's running in a browser, but it opens up like an app. And it feels like an app. And this particular app I'm very proud of because it's very lightweight. It's really doing nothing other than just talking to the index and bringing stuff in. And so Martin, he did this in a couple days. I mean, he had all this stuff all figured out, and he was just adding feature stuff he wanted to do because there was no real hassle for him to have to worry about, are the feeds aggregating? Is stuff updating on time? Are we getting bogus search results? I mean, all the things that we all know actually happens under the hood of the RSS fest that is podcast. And so he turned it into an installable Windows app. He's actually going to make an app that you can submit to the app stores, and really it's just a reference. So this is the guy, who, and he even had a philosophical question. He said, I provided the code, and now I think I want to develop my app for some kind of profit, so I'm not going to share my code. Well, that's fine. However you want to benefit from it, you've already given back. Holy crap! He gave us a reference app and the code. So anyone, I without much trouble, I could at least customize what he did and create my own version of my own podcast player. That's huge. And we have people who have created the cast randomizer. Gosh, I forgot the URL.
So do you know where his public web app resides at? What address that's at?
Podfriend.com.
So I'm at podfriend.com.
If you go to web.podfriend.com, they'll give you the web-only player.
Oh, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. So I
was playing with that this afternoon. That's pretty slick, for sure.
Doesn't that kick ass?
It shows what you can do with
you can
just the web,
and all kinds of stuff.
web.
It's really amazing.
So let me bring it up here, and let me search for a show.
This is the tablet view. That's kind of nice.
Of course, it's in a browser.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the audio. Well, that's not the one I wanted. Let's go with this one. So this is, and if you go to this in your mobile phone, web.podfriend.com, this will load like a mobile app. This is on the desktop. So just so I probably can squeeze it here. Let's see if I can squeeze it down.
Yeah.
So that's probably that's kind of what it will look like when it's on your mobile device. Blubrry built a public web app for our PWA, for our private internal podcasting product. But this again is what this assures. And again, what we go back to, he's building an iOS app, he's building an Android app for commercial reasons, but this can't be deplatformed.
No, and you can go in, take that code, and make an app just for your church podcast and customize it how you want, and distribute it to your clergy. I mean, that's just one idea. Why not? Hey, go get the Professor Finkelstein app. It's got all my lectures in there. Go ahead, and I just put up a new one today, and I just added another feed to this class. That's the stuff I want to see. Now you're talking about a platform for free speech.
And here's another thing, too, that a lot of the sites no longer do. If you go to Apple Podcasts now and you find this show and you see that it's done by me, but you'll be absolutely pained to find a link back to your website. I'm Bill about Big and Brand. So what is it? I'm over here on web.podfriend.com. People listen to my show. I say, I want to go over to Todd's website. They click on it, click on the website link, and did it load in a new... That might be a bug.
Then it failed.
Yeah, it failed. So anyway,
he says it's early.
It's early, but still, it's a link back to my website.
Yeah, so, that's what it should be.
And that's again what Spotify's not doing. That Spotify's not allowing you go and listen to your show on Spotify. The only way they're going to know to go back to your website is to say, "Hey, by the way, folks, make sure you go back to www or such and such.com." And but
also, people are already coming up with the insurance policy to the insurance policy, where every MP3 is distributed on the interplanetary file system. So it's always there. Even if if your hosting company loses it, if something blows up, if someone goes away, it'll be there forever. As long as we've got computers running and we got a couple of pin notes, of course, we'd be happy to do. So all of that kind of stuff, that now you're talking. So
why are we talking about all this? People are saying everything's cool with the way it is for now.
Sure. It's a great time. People can make money
until they tell
they can do deals. It's fantastic. I just want to make sure that the next 5 Joe Rogans have a place to talk crass and whatever it takes. That the next controversial scientist who has a different opinion or doctor can say, hey, here's what I think, and not have to worry about it not being available to anybody. It's still important whether you agree with it or not. I mean, I'm an old man now. Hey, I'm sitting in my rocking chair. I'm 56. I'm saying, hey, children, you don't know what it's like to be able to say whatever you want to say. So, let's
if we go back,
sure
Adam, if we go back to 2003, distribution. There was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was no social media. You could have a website, which I did. I could blog. and I had 200-300 people maybe a week come to the blog if I was lucky. Yeah, I had free speech, but podcasting opened up everything. And while it's a great time in podcasting, I think that innovation in some instances is stalled. I started a group called the RSS Coalition. I tried to get I had Apple there, I had Pandora there, I had all the right people there.
I heard you say it, man. I heard you say it on a recent new media show. I heard you say innovation has halted.
And all I want is 3 new tags to help the podcasting space. I need a closed caption tag. I need a tag for transcripts. And do you know how hard it is to get? If Todd came up with the idea, that was Blubrry's idea. We're not going to do that. So I need a community to say, yes, we're going to agree to doing some of this new stuff to expand the space, but it's all mute without the app developers. The app developers say, why should I add that? There's no incentive for me to add this functionality.
We've added a namespace, and we're the only ones that use it.
So I can say what I want all day long, and I can beg Apple to say, hey, why don't you guys announce it? Then you'll force people's hands. But that's not the way it should be.
How about a really simple idea? Just a simple idea that a store that sells T-shirts could somehow associate with the show ID, whatever it is, and that that connection between the swag and the show can be made very easily, so that it's kind of like, hey, just connect to our store, and and that all the rest kind of happens. We'll process things for you. I don't know. I think the opportunities are limitless. We have no boundaries whatsoever.
So we could have a swag
whatever
tag.
It is, let's do it. I mean, obviously, Dave Jones is, some things he listens to everything, and we pull stuff in, and so far everyone's been in, I think, great agreement over what's happening. That there's always going to be philosophical differences, but there's really, quote a phrase, that no agenda in play. We just want to make it good. I think I'm qualified to make some judgment calls. And I think that, and by the way, I'm correcting myself on fucking it up with the app developers. I just didn't think about it, never had to, and now I'm sad about it. I don't want the radio receivers to go away.
The bottom line, Adam, really is we would have already been there had not Apple come in 2005 and done what they did. Because what we did is we rode the shirt tails of Apple for all this time. And obviously, we've had all these new distribution points come in. It's all great. Content's fantastic. People are making money. But the innovation, which was happening at a rapid pace, put the brakes on, that when.
And what's interesting is that when I see people use the PodFriend web app, the first thing they all say is, what? You can do that from a browser? That's fast. Like, nothing's fast. The apps usually have to do aggregation and all this stuff. They're maintaining a database, crunching, and actually drains your battery. And here's just a little, and that's honest people who just have used apps, like, wow, that's really fast. And then when you make it a progressive web app, this thing is an app,
right?
So it was really easy to grab. I didn't have to identify myself with Apple, let them know that I'm getting a free thing from the store. And all those things you just mentioned, transcripts, closed cap, man, those are all, and I think there's probably 30 more.
I'm sure there's 30 more. Yeah.
They're valuable to people. And I think that people who create those experiences, just like podcasts, if you say, hey, this is valuable, cut me in.
And podcasters are desperate for figure out ways to engage their audience, to connect them to, they're carrying us around literally on their phones, right? I carry you around, Adam, in here. I carry Mike, and it
is so big.
That's right. So I carry you guys around, but what I can do? I can only listen. I can't listen. I can't donate.
Yeah,
I can't.
It's totally uninteractive.
Right.
There's lots of stuff that can be done. And I encourage everybody, go to api.podcastindex.org, sign up, become a developer, get your API keys, join the party. We've got a GitHub, we've got a Mastodon instance, which I think is incredibly valuable because people come in like me who have no real programming or coding expertise, but I know enough about it to have an opinion and help contribute to ideas. And I wasn't looking for another job, but I'm going to be out of mine one day, or those who come behind me will be out if we don't do this. So, this is why I haven't written my book yet, Todd. We have one more chapter to write, my friend, and you are all over it.
And I think what it really boils down to is true and dear to my heart and my team's heart are independent podcast creators. The Wonderies and those folks are going to continue to do the things they do, but at the core, there's 390,000 active independent content creators are creating content in their closets, in their bedroom tables, or bedroom tables.
I'm in the second bedroom.
Yeah. So, or wherever they may be recording. They don't have the luxury of having a nice studio like this, but they're trying to get a message, try to help people. I mean, it runs the number of topics that people are creating today, and the diversity in the space is fantastic. And I think we do not need to be, for a better word, slaves to the commercial entities of the world. We need to be able, as independent content creators, to mold and make podcasting what we want it to be. Yes, I'm a commercial company, but I'm also know where my bread is buttered, and it's independent podcast creators. And if they don't succeed and don't have ways to make this work for them, and Adam, you're looking for your next chapter, let's make sure that the independent podcast creators can at least have enough money to take mom to dinner or make a car payment. Or
I hope to do a hell of a lot better than that for
okay,
everybody.
yeah. So I'm just that's
Your point is really well made. There's another way that you can derive value. I think making money is just the wrong argument.
That's probably true.
Listeners what are the listeners getting? They're getting some value, either because they laughed, cried, learned. These are the basic things. If you have a business, and there's a big business in this. A lot of these podcast networks are making podcasts for corporations, right? So there's value in that. If you have your own business, there's tons of it. What's wrong with the Joe's Hardware update? If he has something interesting, if it's just one click to just subscribe, and it's 4 minutes every now and then, and it actually popped up and alerts me, because I actually it's not lost in this swamp of inbox that podcast players have become. Our radios are pretty boring. We really can do better than that. I mean, this interface is pretty stodgy at this point. So we're going to see that. So I really like to look at value. And ultimately, these days, what is it? I mean, it's an MP3 is a bunch of ones and zeros that you find valuable, and someone sending you an email, which may be valuable. It's just ones and zeros. Maybe it's a coin, whatever it is. So that transfer just has to equalize a little bit more. We got to understand it, and not just worry about. If you ask how many people really listen to our show, I don't know. We don't run stats. I don't run stats. I'm not interested. I don't care. I don't have to have any meetings. I need to pay the rent. Yeah. And now it's the mortgage. Luckily, I married a woman with money. So, so I'm okay. I can come up with my hat. But that's really how I've lived for the past 13 years. Come October 26th is, hey, can I pay the bills? Okay, good. I feel in life we all get exactly what we deserve. And so my friend Joe, he got exactly what he deserved. And everything comes with the price.
That's right.
Everything comes with the price. And it all depends on what you want, where you're at. And, there's an allure for Hollywood type shows, but man, there's a lot of stuff out there that is not just, zip, bang, boop, morning zoo, fun, whatever. There's what a wealth. That's why I love going to the carousel on podcastindex.org, which is basically the most recently, I think, 20 updated podcasts in the database. You just hear stuff like, what?
Where did that come from?
I didn't even know that existed.
Adam,
it's really fun.
Believe it or not, we are almost out of time.
I figured.
It's just we could go for 3 hours on this.
I thank you, gentlemen, both though, for your contribution to this. I can't really come up with the right word for it, but it really is a whole ecosystem and a platform, and above all, and I think that this commemorates that every year when we do it. Is there is a community? There's a community of people who absolutely care, who understand that your content that you make is very valuable, and that the code they make, which is, it takes a little longer to make an app than it does to create an hour of podcast, believe me. So that's also valuable. And right now we're all kind of in the same boat, and we're going to figure it out. If it's there, we'll come across it, and hopefully there will be 10 other ideas and 10 other indexes. I want competition. That's healthy, keeps everybody on their toes, and let's continue to have some fun.
Podcastindex.org. Adam, what's the name of the show again that's not an Apple podcast they need to go find?
Podcasting 2.0. Go to Podfriend, web.podfriend.com, and it's in there. You'll find it, or right on the homepage of podcastindex.org.
Adam, again, thank you so much. We're going to turn this back over to Dave and Steve Lee at International Podcast Day. Thank you so much, Adam, for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. Look forward to talking more about this exciting. Mike, I didn't hardly let you get a word in edgewise. Any parting comments before we go?
No, I was just happy to be a fly on the wall here.
Well, you literally on my screen are just flying the wall, Mike. And I apologize. I'm chatty Cathy when it comes to this, because I got passion, man. It's burning in my belly, and I'm having a really good time. And I appreciate both of you, because you're both part of it and you know it.
All right. Thank you so much. And everyone, hope you enjoyed this. Stand by for the Podcast Awards.